Most beginning composers don't have a melody problem. They don't have a harmony problem. They don't even have a theory problem in general. They have a decision problem. Hey everyone, my name is Purple Planet, but most people just call me Purple. I write a lot of different music. But today I want to talk about something else. Music for music's sake. Not for film, not for video games, not for television or anything else, but music that you write because you want to say something. So I came up with a few composition tips that I wish I had known when I started out composing. And just to be clear, I'm no guru on this, I don't want to pretend like I am. I'm just describing my own thoughts, what I've learned over the years, and what I see goes wrong with a lot of my students. Tip number 1. Know what you're writing for. Even if you're not writing for a film or for a game, whatever you might be writing for, you're still writing for something. A story, a place, a person, a feeling, an image, maybe just an idea. Before I write a piece, I write down in 1 or 2 sentences what the piece is about. Not the theory, not chords, just the idea, the concept, the main thing we're going for. This actually helps me a lot with my music roulette streams as well, where I get a random style or genre and have to compose something in one stream that has to do with that. In that situation, you don't have time to overthink. You just gotta quickly understand, what am I writing? What is the style? What is the music supposed to tell? And the answer is usually quite short. It's a heroic orchestral performance. It's a relaxed bossa nova. It's a dark, steamy, jazz, noir kind of track. What really matters is that you understand the idiom you're writing in. The musical language of the style you're trying to convey. There's a reason why composition teachers have always said that before you write your own symphony, you've got to write Beethoven's 10th symphony. So when you're writing your standalone music, ask yourself, what am I writing about? Really conceptualize that. What other music or art in general already tries to fit in that space? And can we learn something from them? Because a big part of composition is speaking a musical language on purpose. Become a sponge and gather all the information you can get. Tip 2. Know your instruments. As composers, we often write towards the instruments we know ourselves. Pianists write for pianists, guitarists write for guitarists, bass players write for no one. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can also create limitations. Quite some time ago, I had the opportunity to write a big piece, including a lot of cello parts, and I didn't know how to write cello that well. I didn't know the instrument at all. Beyond, of course, the basics I had in instrumentation classes. So instead of guessing, I decided before I would write this big piece, I would write a solo cello piece and work together with a cellist. Together we tried things, we experimented a lot. I wrote techniques that were uncomfortable and she would say, this doesn't work, that does work, this could work, but maybe write it a bit differently. And I learned more from that collaboration than from any one instrumentation class. Because instruments are not just ranges, they are physical things, they are human. Each and every instrument brings something with them that they do very well and things that they don't like to do that much. That's why you don't hear that much clarinet in fusion jazz. So my advice to you is, write for instruments that you don't play. Even better, work with people who actually can play them. Within that, there's something more important, which is, don't just write what is easy to write, write something that's effective to hear. Tip 3. Don't underestimate form. Form is the structure in which you tell your story, and it's just as important as your melody and your harmony. Most people think of form as AABA or ABA or first chorus, phrases that come in 4 or 8 bars. But I think that's wrong. Form is about time and time management. Listeners don't hear bar numbers. They experience seconds, minutes and the passing of time. Or not passing if you enjoy any type of Wagner opera. Something my old composition teacher showed me really changed my perspective on form. He would always make a narrative timeline of a piece before he began. He would write down the story he wanted to tell and give a certain amount of seconds to each part he wanted to tell. He gave me a very simple example that I will share with you today. The little piece called Boy Breaks His Leg. Not an amazing title, but a boy breaks his leg. Singing while riding a bike without hands, 45 seconds. We establish the norm, the dog crossing the roads, 20 seconds. Something interferes. The fall, 10 seconds. Relatively quick, as a fall is. The blood, 20 seconds. Build up. The ambulance, 25 seconds. It would take quite a bit of time to transport someone from wherever this boy is to the hospital. Emergency room, 5 seconds.
We need to keep this
The
patient.
move from an ambulance to the emergency room is a lot shorter. The injection, 1 second. Grandma sitting next to the bed, 45 seconds. Side note, I'm only now realizing that the kid is getting an injection after falling from his bike. That's kind of weird. Anyways, what's interesting about this is that if you write it down narratively like this in a timeline, you already have your form for your music. And it's gonna be way more easy to break away from that standard form that we see over and over again in music. So when you're writing a piece, especially if it's programmatic or it tells a certain story, try this. Write down a timeline, describe what happens, decide how long each section lasts, and only then start composing. Because form is basically time management of emotions. You decide how long the listener is gonna stay in a certain mood before something changes. You decide when something new happens, when we speed up, when we slow down, when we come back, or maybe we never come back. So start thinking about form not just as bars or letters, but as time. And something you'll realize when you start thinking like this is that you probably need more time than you gave yourself. And that's not a bad thing, because tip number 4, don't be afraid to change things. There's a famous phrase in art, kill your darlings. But I think that phrase is often misunderstood. It doesn't mean you have to delete everything you love. It just means don't keep something just because you are attached. Sometimes a piece needs just something a little bit different. A different melody, a different form, a different transition, a different melody, whatever it is. Sometimes it just needs it. And often you know it needs it. I recently finished a large symphonic piece I worked on for about 2 years. And somewhere halfway through that process, I knew that parts could be better. The form wasn't quite right, some sections were too long, and some ideas I just didn't develop enough. I didn't want to change them. I just didn't want to do it. I had spent so much time on those sections. We're talking about maybe a month, 2 months of work. And that's a very dangerous reason to keep something. Time spent is not the same thing as quality. So what I did was this. I finished the piece and called it version 1. I duplicated the entire project and decided I'm gonna work on version 2 now. I'm gonna save version 1, but I'll work on version 2 now. And the interesting thing about this is that the new parts I wrote were just better. They felt very strange at first, and that's something that's quite common, is that the parts you rewrite feel quite weird, but that's not because they're worse, it's just because the old version has been stuck in your head for a while. You've heard it maybe hundreds of times, so of course you're gonna have some kind of connection to that music. So I think the important takeaway from that is that it's okay to change things, and changing things doesn't automatically mean throw away your old ideas. Just as long as you're not afraid to change things if the piece requires it. Composing is not just about writing something once, it's about rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. And a big part of that is also deciding what gets to stay and what doesn't get to stay. But always save that which you leave behind. Tip number 5. Write music you actually enjoy. Now this might sound quite obvious, but it becomes very important, especially if you want to make it your work. If you work in music, you'll write music you don't care about quite a lot. I've written terrible Christmas arrangements, rock covers for big bands, questionable choir arrangements, because they were commissioned, and I needed a job. You know, it's just part of the reality of being a musician, especially a composer. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's called being a professional. But if that's the only music you write, something is gonna happen after a while. You're gonna start to feel a bit empty creatively. You're gonna start to feel like you're producing music just instead of creating. That's actually one of the reasons I started this large personal piece I was talking about in the last tip. Because I needed to find myself again. I needed something that was completely mine. Music that I wanted to write. So my advice is, even if you do commissioned work, even if you study composition, even if you have those deadlines, always have one project in your back pocket that is for you. That is in the most cocky way possible, in the most egotistical way possible, you. Music you like, music you believe in, Music where you don't have to ask anyone for permission. Music that reminds you of why you started writing music in the first place. Because if you only write music for others, you're gonna become a really good craftsman, but you might just stop being an artist. So those were my 5 tips for starting composers. To quickly summarize, know what you're writing, learn about the instruments you write for and what instruments fit. Think about form as time, don't be afraid to change things, and write music you actually enjoy. If you take anything away from this video, let it be this. Composing is not about just writing notes. It's about making decisions, some of which we spoke about today. Decisions about sound, time, structure, about what you want to say. And you get better at making those decisions the more music you write, the more music you listen to, and the more you work with other musicians around you. So write a lot, rewrite a lot, be curious, work with people. Don't forget why you started doing this in the first place. Thanks everyone for watching, and if people are interested, I'd love to make a second part to this video. In any case, I hope to see you in the next one. Ciao ciao.